Hello, everybody. Thank you for listening to 107.7 FM New Orleans. We love y'all. You're listening to What the Frick Live. I'm your host, Emily Menshouse. I'm Mr. Will Martinez with me with Dark Fringe Radio.
Hello. What is up? Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing great. You know, my son went back to school this week.
Oh, is it back to school this week for you guys? Okay.
Yeah, it was back to school this week for us on Wednesday.
Nice.
And let me tell you, the older he gets, the more he acts like me. I have to be like stiff with him, but then I understand. Like I get it because I'm not a morning person either.
Yeah. And like you wake up, you're like, I know, brother, I know it sucks, but you got to get up.
I was this close of getting the cold water bottle out to squirt him this morning, but yeah.
I know how it is.
Thank you everybody for tuning in. Dark Fringe Radio had an episode come out over The Simpsons, which always reveals all kinds of truth. If you don't mind, we'll tell everybody about your show and things that's coming up.
Oh, thank you, Emily. I appreciate that. Yeah, you can catch our show at darkfringeradio.com. As Emily stated, we just came out with an episode this past weekend. The Simpsons predicted everything, and we really dive deep into a lot of different predictions and some, very questionable ones, and some that could be some innocent ones, just that could be predicted by just happenstance. But we really get into it. It's really interesting. So check it out.
Do you think the CIA is behind the Simpsons?
I don't think the CIA is behind the Simpsons, but I know like one of the creators is like a 33rd degree Freemason, and we can go down that rabbit hole. That could take 2 hours right there. So
smoke and mirrors.
That says anything.
All right. The Masonic Lodge people are like, no.
I know, right?
Smoke and mirrors.
They're coming for me.
So anyway, we're streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch again, Twitter, and Rumble. So thank you everybody for tuning in. If you're watching from any of those social media platforms, especially Twitch because we're new, but Rumble, if you're on Rumble, please give us a thumbs up. Have some comments on there. Share this out. YouTube also give us a thumbs up. I don't market YouTube that much because I lost everything from YouTube because cancel culture. Blah. I'm not bitter. I am, but I'm saying I'm not. So, but if you are on Facebook and you start leaving comments, because the more comments you make, even the hearts that you give us, it keeps us in the algorithm. So please do that. But if you start making comments and it comes up like Facebook user, please go to StreamYard.com/Facebook to give StreamYard permission to use your name and picture. We'd love to know who we're talking to and see your picture. And we always post questions and stuff up on the screen. So we appreciate everybody. Big news this week for What the Frick Live. And we have a Canadian guest on tonight. So Canada, you're gonna love this. Oh, nice. We moved up on Apple Podcasts in Canada. That's to awesome. 114. Okay, in the UK, we moved up to 148 in the UK.
Listen, in a world full of podcasts, that's not so bad. I can tell you that.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I think we're a shadow band in the USA.
Shadow band, huh?
We're a shadow band because I'm restricted now. Actually, the show tonight, because I go and share in groups, I'm not even allowed to share in groups for the next 13 hours.
What?
Yeah, they won't let me share. They won't let me share this show in 13 hours. It's weird. I don't know why. So I was sharing this morning. I can't share this evening, and I don't get anything from Facebook. But we moved up. Also, advertisers. We are now allowed to have advertisers too. And I'm going to have a link pulled up. But if you're listening to this, you can just reach out on any social media platform. Reach out to me. We are able to have advertisers because we have enough downloads, we have enough listeners, we have all that stuff. We worked really hard, and I couldn't do it without Will Martinez. Well,
you could do it without her. So
thank you, and the guest, and also the faithful listeners that's listening this evening. We appreciate you, and thank you everybody on 107.7 FM. We appreciate you too for tuning in. So we have a guest that's coming on tonight. It's one of my dear friends. I'm going to go ahead and introduce her, but we are going to play a trailer after I introduce her, just to get us in the mood, because spooky season's right around the corner.
It is right around the corner.
I like to hit in August. We'll have a hint or two in September, and then all of October is going to be spookiness with great guests. But we have Melissa Dawn that's coming on this evening. She's born in Canada during the 70s. She's part of Generation X. Melissa's journey has been defined by a passion for ghostly folklore and dedicated to the study of electric. I always want to say electric. Eclectic history. She uses a variety of captivating, not capitated. I'm thinking of Headless Horseman, capitated. Exploration with both current events and historical matters. She presents Canadian folklore and she delves into lesser known American tales, but we're going to be talking about the Headless Horseman tonight, which probably is one of the major first folklore stories that actually rippled into other countries. And we're going to be talking about ghostly encounters. We're going to be talking about a Forerunner. Have you ever heard of Forerunner?
No, that's actually something that's new to my my knowledge. I don't know nothing about that, but I'm really excited to figure this out. And
I'm excited about that. And we're also going to talk, because Melissa does talk about politics in that she has a great following. We're not going to get into politics. We're going to talk about time travel and politics this evening. So let's play Sleepy Hollow 1999 movie trailer, because that was the year I graduated. We love this movie. It hit me. I love Johnny Depp. You can't go wrong with Johnny Depp. And after this, we'll have Melissa on the show. Here we go.
I am Constable Ichabod Crane, sent from New York to investigate murder in Sleepy Hollow.
How much have your superiors explained to you?
Only that the three were slain in open ground, their heads severed from their bodies.
Taken by the Headless Horseman, taken back to hell. He rode a giant black steed. To look at him made your blood run cold. Even today, the Western Woods is a haunted place where brave men will not venture.
We have murders in New York without benefit of ghouls and goblins.
You're a long way from New York, Constable.
Is everyone in this village enthralled to superstition?
We have many things to talk about, even in this backward place.
Excuse my manner. I'm not used to.
Female company?
Murder! The Horseman's killed again!
The assassin is a man of flesh and blood, and I will discover him.
Are you so certain of everything?
Perhaps there's a bit of a witch in you, Katrina.
Why do you say that?
Because you've bewitched me.
There we have it. Sleepy Hollow. And we have Miss Melissa Dawn from melissadauneeclectic.com. Thank you, Melissa, for coming and joining the show.
Well, thank you, everyone. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. I'm glad we're talking about the Headless Horseman, being that I'm Canadian. And now in America, I think it's the best thing to start with, the classic folk tale of America.
Oh, we're going to start with, we hardly talk about it though. Will, have you ever heard like a podcast that really truly talks about Headless Horseman?
No, but it's funny. My stepdad was from Cuba, and he said that he saw the Headless Horseman when he was a kid. So I always knew of the legend from, a kid growing up, and then of course hearing the Americanized version of it.
That the Disney version?
No, I mean, he
told
me
like the famous one.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, I actually read books on it and stuff like that. And then, I saw the Disney one, but I was like, I knew what it was. I knew it was like of course, a characterization or a cartoon version of it. But I kind of had, a little bit of a history with this subject. growing up. And he swore that he saw it when he was a kid, running up
like
the
for
field.
real?
Yeah, no, he said he had a actual encounter with the Headless Horseman. So
amazing.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what he told me when he was a kid. Yeah.
Is he still alive?
Weird stuff. No, he has passed.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about Headless Horsemen here in a little bit, but really quick with Melissa Dodd. You have been doing. I've known you for many years now, and you've done several different podcasts. But the heart of your spirit, what I get from, is the folklore, everything about it. So, what drew you to these topics or history and things? Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Folklore it's pretty important. It's the history of the people. It's sort of a collection of all our customs that we do, our traditions, our tales, our stories, but it's usually done or passed down orally. And a lot of folklore was getting lost in like the earliest 20th century. And there has been people like a Canadian folklorist, Helen Crichton, and people who have been collecting it and kind of doing the opposite, which is recording it where audible, and they started by recording songs, and out of recording songs that were disappearing because of modernization, you get a lot of, she collected a lot of ghost stories, because ghost stories are these tales that usually people just hand down word of mouth from their experiences. So I was fascinated with it because it was something that I felt, almost every culture has an oral tradition, and folklore is just something worth preserving, these stories, and keeping them alive, because modernization seems to be kind of whitewashing it. And when you go back and you look at these stories and what the people believe, there were a lot more superstition in them, but there's a lot of wisdom and tales and lessons in them as well.
Awesome. And Melissa, you have a website too that we're going to be sharing out here. It's melissadoneclectic.com, and you're going to be doing a lot more podcasts about. Well, you've done podcasts over some of these topics for a while, but you're getting ready to start up something new,
right? So yeah, it's a new show that I have. I used to run a show called The Secret Door. So I have an archive on my website now, an archive of ghostly stories, and I picked some of my favorite shows from that, so it's there. And now I'm going to build with this new show, Melissa Dawn, and I'll probably have, I have a huge following on Twitter, so if you go to the website, please follow me on Twitter. It does get a little political there, so beware. But also I want to make little shorts on TikTok and little videos as opposed to just longer podcasts as well. It seems to be more catchy to have shorter stories for people to sort of get the gist of it.
It's our attention span nowadays. TikTok has helped that. It's 3 minutes or less. 3 minutes or less.
Sadly. But we'll do both, long and short.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask Melissa a question or so, and then we'll dive into Headless Horseman, I guess.
Yeah,
we can dive through it now.
Let's do it. I mean, one of the things about this story in particular is that it kind of roots itself in, the politics of, that time and what was going on, the Salem witch trials and all that stuff was happening during that time. And, it was just very odd how they were able to kind of pull all that stuff together. Do you think that, this particular story was maybe a mash of different stories put together and just maybe evolved over time? Or what's your opinion on that?
Absolutely, no doubt. I mean, you've got Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. There's other renditions. It goes all the way back to Celtic times. And it's not the exact same story. So Washington Irving, his parents are Scottish, and I have no doubt that he would have gotten some kind of legend, some kind of exposure to. There's a Scottish version that rides in a kilt. He's a warrior, same idea. There's other fairy versions that are just more demonic, like the Delahan. There was another book written later where the Headless Horseman type of figure is in Texas, and it has to do with the Mexican-American War. But this particular story is really about the German Hessian that they defeat during the Revolutionary War. So it's really about the founding of America, but it's set in 1820. But the Hessian horseman that they defeat is that was defeated is 1776 era. So it's really important to almost the foundation of America. And it's interesting that he writes this, but it is seeped in a whole bunch of tales that go right back to Celtic times, where you can find all different kinds of headless figures, headless horsemen, headless fairies.
Not just headless, but don't you think it's a replica of death? The Grim Reaper? Is this a Forerunner? We're going to talk about Forerunners here in a little bit.
Well, you know what?
I never heard of that. Is this a Forerunner of the Reaper?
It could be taken as a Forerunner. I mean, I suppose it could be, because a Forerunner, basically, before, just in case nobody knows, there's a lot of different versions and different names. In Eastern Canada, we called it a Forerunner because it was like a omen, and it could come in the terms of a specter, knocks, any kind of strange events, milk curdling, weird, strange things. A lot of people would see a specter or maybe even a ghost of themselves, or they would have what was called the death knocks. You get 3, doppelganger or a ghost. You get the 3 death knocks, and it's basically saying a bad thing is coming, death is coming. You know, the Irish has the banshee, but this one's a little more. The Headless Horseman's not just a forerunner; he's about revenge.
Oh,
he's a little bit different. He's taking vengeance on the people, which would be the Americans who killed him.
How did he lose his head?
Well, they chopped his head off. He was a Hessian. He was German. He was over fighting on behalf of the Europeans in some versions. And of course, the American revolutionaries defeat him, chop his head off, and bury him. And so now he's supposed to be I don't know if it's at Halloween. In the Disney tale, it's Halloween. It probably changes, but he comes at a certain time of year with some have it that he's holding his head, some has it that he has a pumpkin for a head, and he's looking for revenge, either for his head or he's looking to get somebody. And it's an interesting concept because there's this whole idea of death and fear of death, but removing your head is sort of a, you're dead, you're gone. It's end game, and it takes away your identification, right? And so it's that fear of non-humanized, and the other interesting part about it is he's almost taking revenge. It's almost the ghost of the past war still haunting.
Revolutionary War.
Yeah, the revolutionaries. It's the ghost of Europe, or what they were fighting against, still coming back to take revenge and haunt them.
Dean Bertram, real quick, because he's going to be a guest next week too. By the way, I heard it was a cannonball that blew off his head. That makes a lot of sense.
In one of the versions, it is a cannonball. Yeah,
during the Revolutionary War, which Washington Irving that wrote this story, and he also wrote Rip Van Winkle. He was born like a year after the Revolutionary War. And he was actually named after Washington. So it makes sense if he would write about it, because I'm sure he heard all kinds of stories growing up from the Revolutionary War.
And there might have even been a tale of, don't go out on this night. That's how folk tales, like, don't go out on this night. The fairies will get you. Don't go out because the horsemen will chase you. And if you have to get across the bridge, or you have to get somewhere before this time, or he'll get you.
Doug says, I remember going as a Headless Horseman when I was 10 years old on Halloween. I love it. I love it too. I think it plays a whole big huge role in a lot of different things throughout the years. But go ahead, Willie. I think you were saying something.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, Melissa, do you think that this particular, being is a curse, or is it a residual haunting? What do you think if you were to have to classify it?
I think it might be a little bit of both. Because he is out for revenge. He's about terrorizing the people of Sleepy Hollow. But there's other elements to the story, though. I mean, you've got so there's revenge, there's the curse, there's sort of that he's repeating something, looking for his head, and throwing it across the bridge. I think it's a little bit of both. But you also have got a subtext of this Ichabod Crane character in the Sleepy Hollow version, where he's like this gangly, dorky guy, and it's almost like a challenge for him, and he's sort of trying to prove he's brave, and he win Katrina Van Tassel's hand, and the original version, and you've got those archetypes where the Brahm sort of muscle guy, and so there's that plays along the storyline too. So it's about facing some kind of fear as well.
I can't help but think of Charles Dickens during this time too, because we got this gangly looking guy, Ichabod Crane, and that might not be well accepted in society. And then Charles Dickens, we have Scrooge that a whole lot of people don't know, and he has this spiritual awakening and stuff. It was his Lord have mercy, he went through the ringer, the past, the present, and the future.
He had it coming, though. He had it coming.
He did. He was.
But here's what's interesting too with the writer of Sleepy Hollow or the Headless Horseman, Washington Irving. He created Santa Claus.
Did he really?
Yes, he wrote about Santa Claus. Saint Nick. Saint Nick is what they called him. And then Charles Dickens takes Saint Nick and he puts it over into the Christmas Carol. Well, we all know, like, and no wonder. I honestly think that Washington Irving was more accepted over in Europe because he was an American author. He was our first American author that could be a celebrity. He formed groups or clubs. They loved having clubs back then. But honestly,
Hellfire Club.
No, it wasn't that, but I can't remember his club name. Maybe I can look it up here in a second. But I think that Charles Dickens and him played off each other a whole lot. And you know, Santa Claus, he was one of the forerunners of Santa Claus, was Washington Irving.
Interesting.
With Saint Nick, and Saint Nick was not that very nice of a guy. He came in at the nighttime too. Like, what's up with Washington Irving?
It is a little creepy when you think about how we turn this into a positive figure that brings us toys. And that you see the evolution. A lot of these folk tales, by the way, if you go back, they're really horrible and awful. My stepdad was from Germany, and some of the tales he even got told in the 50s. 40s were like terrifying. You would never tell your kid that, but they used to tell the most graphic of stuff, and it's interesting to see how it's evolved into something like Santa is bringing you presents, and oh, by the way, he watches you all the time.
That's interesting because I was actually listening to a video the other day about how this guy was his teacher was basically describing what he was watching when it came to the Smurfs. Now, the Smurfs actually have a darker meaning to them, supposedly.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, so supposedly the Smurfs, the blue Smurfs, those are actually dead children that are laying in the field. And the reason why they have that mushroom on their head is because when you have a dead body decomposing in the winter, in the spring, the mushrooms come up. And that's where they live, under the mushrooms. So there's a lot of parallels to those two things. So, yeah, I could understand and see how this, one thing that was supposed to be, one certain thing, it just evolves into something completely else, over time.
I think our writers feed off each other. I love a good short story. I love a good short story. But these clubs back in the day, I think they all get together and be like, Washington, you're going to write about this. And then I'm going to spin off.
They got high first. They got really high first.
Mushrooms.
And then they said, let's get together and let's write some cool shit. That's what they did.
I swear. So Headless Horseman, folklore. Yes. What makes something a folklore, Melissa? Like, is it just generational that is not true but could be? Is that folklore?
Well, like I said, in terms of a story, he's written it down. But there's going to be oral versions of it going down. They're going to have certain motifs, right? So you're going to have certain archetypes in there, but it's always going to be a tale, usually about something that's happening in the community that's affecting everybody, and they're giving you a warning. Because these folk tales aren't for nothing. They have a warning about some element that's bad in life, that you need to have a lesson. And so instead of directly telling you, don't go off that bridge, it's got a mechanical or it's got this or this, they tell it in sort of a story. And Indians did this all the time, raven, bird. It was a story that was telling you a moral, telling you something for you to live by. And it was, a lot of people in those days didn't have the ability to write it down like Washington Irving did. They would just tell it orally by mouth. And so there's probably a whole bunch of different versions of a headless horseman that people would tell about being on the bridge or don't go in the woods. It's telling you to stay away from somewhere or beware of something at a certain time. And so there's always a moral tale. And so that's really important about these folk tales.
Really quick, Blue Smurfs, never trust Blue. And we had a conversation real quick before. I'm not going into
I don't know.
This will go off topic. I'm not going to go into this. It deals with The Simpsons, though, and Blue's an interesting to me right now. It deals with DEW, and we'll talk about that some other time tonight. But the Headless Horseman, real quick, do you think that placated into other type of folklore like Crybaby Bridge? We have tons of Crybaby Bridges and stuff that's happening now. Like everybody, are they subconsciously like dealing with these bridges? I don't know.
Bridges have a whole bunch of folklore around them and dark stuff, where like children being murdered. I have one on my website about a crying boy on a bridge in one of the cities I used to live in. So of course, people are going to take that kind of, like the Headless Horseman could become, I don't know, a guy riding a motorcycle in modern times. Like it could evolve to different things, telling people, don't drive your motorcycle fast or whatever. It could evolve into different modes of transportation. It could be, it depends on what the moral is or what bad things are happening in the culture. A lot of these tales, they adapt them to address something, some kind of, pandemic or accident or some issue that's happening in the community.
Go ahead, Will, if you have anything to talk.
Yeah, Grimm's Fairy Tale.
Yeah.
I mean, perfect example of that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people don't realize like a lot of these fairy tales that we, know about in modern day, had an, origin story, and it really came from that set of books that, those brothers, penned, and they don't realize that it came from a really, usually horrible story or something bad that really happened. So, it's amazing, again, how we talk about how it all started, maybe from these lessons that we were supposed to learn and then morphed into something else. But I want to know about this Forerunner stuff. We got to get into this. We're already halfway through the episode. I want to know more about this Forerunner stuff.
Well, I think that, like I've already sort of mentioned what a Forerunner was, which is like an omen or a prediction, or it's a spirit. And sometimes the spirit's attached to families, like a banshee. You see them in Ireland. They'll call them something different. It could be like a Hounds of a Baskerville kind of thing. But in the east coast of Canada, they called it the Forerunner because it was a prediction. It was forbearing information. Usually it was about someone who was going to die in the family. And so when it could be your milk would spoil, but a lot of times people would hear like a disembodied sound, like a carriage, and there would be no carriage there. The most famous is the death knock. You would hear 3 knocks, and it wasn't just a normal knock. It was like this kind of eerie, echoey knock. And people would know, okay, that's a Forerunner. Something bad is going to happen in the family. And so I collected a story. I'll share it with you in a second. But a lot of times I think people were looking for ways, in my opinion, to control their environment or to have some prediction. And maybe they could stop it. Maybe they couldn't. So maybe these things were real. Maybe it was some paranormal event that really happened. Or maybe it was just they were looking for a sign. And so everything's a sign. I'm not sure. But there are even creepier stories. And one of my stories came from my grandmother. When she was younger. I wrote it as anonymous at the time because she was alive and she didn't want her name out there, but she's passed on now, so I could probably say that. But she was a young girl. Her mother had already passed away, and she was at her aunt's house. And her father was a laborman, but he was working all the way on the other end of the city. And she wasn't expecting him. I think they were doing cards or they were doing something like that. My article about it goes into more depth, so you can check that out on my website. But she looks out the window and she sees him walking down the street and then up the walkway to her aunt's house. And she was like really surprised because he didn't have a vehicle. This is back in 1955 or 54, something like that. I can't remember what year he died. I can't recall it. Anyway, she sees him coming up the walkway, so she runs to the door to let him in. And when she opens the door, she heard him coming up to the door. When she opens it, there's nobody there. And she's totally baffled and totally like, what is going on? And her aunt right away, being very superstitious, more into the supernatural and kind of probably some spiritualism stuff, was really terrified. She's like, okay, that's a Forerunner. Something bad's going to happen.
Wow.
Anytime. And eventually what happened, I don't know how much time. I'm very specific in the article, but I think it was not too much time at all. And he was... my grandmother brushed it away because she was a really logical, common sense person. But I think it was, I don't know, maybe a few weeks, few months, I can't remember. He came home from the pub. He was a little tipsy, and he went out into the yard to look after their horse, the mare. And he was kind of like trying to get this horse in, and the horse swung its head and knocked him really hard. And he thought he was fine, but eventually they took him to the hospital, and he had a brain bleed. And he died. And so my aunt always told my grandmother, you saw your father's Forerunner, you saw your father's Forerunner was himself, telling you that he was going to die. And they didn't know if it was him or somebody else. And there's a lot more to the story that I talk about in the article, because there was other Forerunners and other things like that. But it's kind of, you get a lot of stories where people almost see themselves. And that's why people are terrified of doppelgangers or seeing some kind of ghost of themselves, because it's a bad omen.
Mm-hmm.
So real quick though, with Forerunners, and we hear doppelgangers, especially a lot in Kentucky with Waverly Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky. There's that.
I want to go there.
Infamous. It's an hour and a half for me. I've never been. I have no desire to go.
No?
I hate to say it.
I know you said that.
I hate to say it, I have no desire to go. I've seen the outside of it and everything, but they don't have any control of who goes in and who comes out of that place. They don't know the weirdness that goes on with some people and stuff in there. But can a Forerunner be a dream?
Yeah, I don't see why not. It's that you have lots of dreams that are premonitions and that give you bad omens, or you think something's going to happen. So absolutely.
Speaking of which, I was actually watching Peaky Blinders. You ever watch that show, by the way?
Oh, yes, I love that show.
So, by the way, you know, their background is in more of the, very eclectic background of, the, what is it called? It'll come to me in a second. Anyways, but he had a dream about a black crow. And usually in that culture, when they dreamt about a black crow, that means that somebody was going to double cross them, somebody close to them. And it basically happened in the series. So it's amazing how these little things, come across every, different type of culture throughout the world.
Yes. And I'm sure, in Japan, they have some version, but it's totally different and serves a different cultural purpose.
Mm-hmm. Gypsy, by the way. That's what I meant to say. That's what I was missing.
So that's what Allison says. They were gypsy. Just real quick though, with dreams and stuff, I dreamed. I'm going to say, and Banshee deals with this too. This is so weird. I have not talked about this. My aunt passed away February 1st of 2020. My uncle and her were married for 72 years. That's the only person he ever had. She took care of everything. She was the man of the house. Even though I love my uncle very much, Uncle George. Love him. He, long story short, 2 weeks later after Valentine's Day, he committed suicide. It affected my whole entire family. It still affects us to this day. But my Uncle George's complaint was that he was hearing his wife yell for him in the middle of the night, and he'd get up and go to her room and find out she's not there. They slept in separate rooms because George snored so loud, and I can testify to that. Going camping when I was very young, and I was always saying, no, I do not want to be in the tent with George. I do not I'm going to sleep in the other tent. So anyway, I'm going to tell you, one night it was super creepy. I went live. This was on my Facebook page that I don't have anymore. Something happened that night that I walked through my house, and the cabinet door in my kitchen was open, and it was the cabinet door that had all the china that my Aunt Darla gave me. And it's weird. I never open that door. It's China. I don't do China. Like I have it, but I don't do China. And stuff. It's a door I never open. It's open. I'm like, what the heck? So I shut the door, and something tells me to go to their home. So I'll go to their home. The home is empty. Nobody's there. My cousins are trying to clean it up, get this stuff out. It's very traumatic. But the porch light was on. And I go down this house. It's like 11 o'clock at night. The porch light's on. I pull up in the driveway and I just sit there and I roll down the window and I hear 2 times, I'm not joking, Banshee. Oh, sorry. I'm getting creeped out. Banshee. And I'm out. I heard it. I come back home. Come into my foyer, which is, I have a cabinet, and anybody's listening to this, I'll post it up on social media tonight on What the Frick Live on Facebook and Instagram. I have a cabinet that the doors slide, and you have to push. This is an old cabinet. You have to push to make it open. And a lot of that stuff in this cabinet is memorabilia from my Aunt Darla growing up. There's letters in there. There's birthday cards. It's from my Aunt Darla. When I came home, that door on that cabinet was open just a little bit. That what made me went through the Banshee rabbit hole, which a lot of the times it says that if you've lost your loved one, that's like the Banshee yells your name in the middle of the night and everything. And I think that placated into my uncle's suicide in many ways. But
I'm sorry to hear about that.
Well, I'm sorry to hear about, but God looks on the heart, doesn't look on the brain. But I never heard Banshee before. And I messaged some people before. I'm like, what's a Banshee? And then I started looking up stuff on the internet. It's absolutely crazy. And this is the first time I think we've even talked about Banshee on What the Frick Live.
It's very Irish folklore. You know, it's sometimes they're hideous or sometimes a red-haired woman, but she usually comes wailing.
Well, that's what
she's usually attached to certain families, and she'll come wailing.
Well,
and they know someone's going to die.
O'Malley.
Very Irish in origin.
O'Malley's last name. So
interesting.
He would tell me he would hear her crying or yelling his name in the middle of the night, George, and he would go to help his wife, and she wasn't there, and the sound of it drove him, in my opinion, I don't know, drove him insane. But I left and I kept sitting there and thinking, like, I should have done something more. I should have just gone over there, or you know how it leaves the family, like I should have. But that's a folklore, right? That's considered folklore?
Banshee is definitely a folkloric figure, like a forerunner. I used to tell a story on one of my podcasts I did with a co-host about a cat that was a forerunner. It had been a tortured cat, and it would show up in the manor, and they, you know, all mutilated, and they would be aghast. And every time it showed up, someone in the family died a horrible accident.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's all sorts. It could be spectral animals. Like I said, on the east coast of Canada, knocks were a big thing. If you heard 3 knocks, and it wasn't like a normal knock, it was not good news. People, you know, it scared the bejesus out of people.
By the way, real quick, just to make things a little bit lighter, we have a Twitcher. We have a Twitch person.
Hi, Twitcher. Nice.
I know. So
good to see
Very
you.
nice. There we go. Very cool. Very cool. Well, you know, I can tell you a real quick story if you want to hear about some foreshadowing, forerunning, or whatever you want to call it. But my mom told me the story when she was alive all the time. But she went up north to go to visit her family. You know, her immediate family and everything up there. And one night she was at my grandma's house, and they were sleeping in the room together. And it was probably like 10 o'clock at night, and they were getting ready, you know, just to go to bed. They're laying in bed, and everything's off. And then all of a sudden, they hear a crash of glass, like something was just broken. Like if you were to take, 5 or 6 different dishes and just throw them on the floor. And they got up, but there was nothing anywhere. They couldn't find anything anywhere. And next day, they found out that a cousin of mine actually died in a car accident at that same time. And so that she's always told me that story. And, there's a lot of those stories in my family of things happening or things happening before and kind of like forewarning or some type of a harbinger of some type, and just bringing that forward. Yeah. It brings me to like the Mothman, the Silver Springs disaster that happened there too, right?
That's over by me.
That's right by you too, right?
Yeah. We're getting ready to go to Mothman.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I don't know too much about Mothman myself. I haven't investigated a lot, but so I'm not going to comment on that one.
Well, I have a question. Oh, go ahead, Melissa.
No,
I don't want to. I'm trying to pull up something while you're talking. Well, I have a question because I posted. I'm trying to bring it up right now to read this. It's taking me a minute. I'm not one to post about dreams, and this is kind of like current with what's going on in Hawaii. I'm going to see if I can share my screen without cutting out. If I cut out, I'm sorry, everybody. You're just going to have to go over to the B system and go look at my dream. Hold on here. Where is it? Okay. Hopefully this will share to the screen. This was a dream I had in January of 2023. It dealt with Hawaii, and I'm not someone that posts about dreams, which I talk about it. I don't know. Hold on. Can you see it yet?
It's coming up. It's swirling. Okay, here it is.
There we go. Okay. This is January 20th up here, 2023. I'm not one to post about dreams I have, but I'm a crying mess right now. I woke up in the middle of the night. I mean, I'm telling you, I was uncontrollable. I went to sleep early tonight and just woke up to a dream that seemed so real. It was so real that I was just standing there. I almost felt like I was floating. And it felt like I was on a dock, and I was just watching everything. I saw a sign that said, "This way to Hawaii." And at first, I thought a volcano erupted, but then I heard all kinds of planes. Now, what I was saying about the planes in the sky is because the only thing I have in my brain with Hawaii is Pearl Harbor. Honestly, I watched some videos, and what I think with the planes in the sky was the wind. It was hundreds of planes is what I couldn't see them due to a ton of smoke and people yelling. It's happening again, and the happening again, I went down the rabbit hole to see what that meant, because obviously it wasn't a Pearl Harbor thing. And that's the Great Reset of 1810 to 1817, which they did the same daggone things. And I woke up with my heart in my throat, pounding like crazy. I was a crying mess. Now, this is just a dream. It could mean nothing, but I almost feel like we're going to have another Pearl Harbor moment. I believe history does repeat itself, but I hope I'm wrong. I sure hope it was just a terrible nightmare. I haven't had a dream that bad in a long time. The yelling, the screaming, I should have probably put screaming in there, was absolutely horrific. That's what scared me so bad. And I couldn't stop crying. It was a bad dream. Is that a forerunner?
Premonition. I think it's more of a premonition of an actual world event. Forerunners are usually attached to families and death within families. I think you've had some kind of tapped into some kind of global collective that's bigger than a forerunner. Myself, Emily.
Okay.
But that's my opinion.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm sitting here thinking Forerunner with that. Wild Bill's on here. Mothman is a few different places. Yeah, well, Mothman honestly could be the Snallygaster. Up in New York,
Chicago. He's in Chicago too. Yeah,
but we have the Headless Horseman too in different places, Guatemala, all over the world too. Headless Horseman, type stuff. So anyway, so for Forerunner, Melissa, I'll ask a question. I'll have Will follow up, and then we'll talk about something else here in a second, because we were going to talk about time travel in a minute, because that's super interesting with time travel, and I got some surprises. Maybe. I don't know if you call them surprises. I got some surprises with time travel. But Melissa, real quick, so with forerunning, us Americans would call it a doppelganger in some ways. Is that?
Well, if it shows up as yourself, there's some people, and I would find that terrifying. I'm reading a book by Helen Crichton, who was a famous Canadian folklorist, and it was like they were down a dark road and this mysterious figure shows up and it chases them, and it's all skeletal. When they got close to it, it was all skeletal and horrible, and it chases them and they get away from it. And years later, one of the guys that was involved in the chase got sick and he was dying, and his friend who was with him when they were chased came to see him. It was maybe a year later, and when he went to see him on his deathbed, that was the figure that was chasing them. He looked just like it, and it scared the life out of him. He can barely talk about it. It was like something telling him your fate's coming. And that was the story. It was so creepy. So that's, one thing, but usually it's like I said, knocking, or it can be a doppelganger. But it's strange omens about death, But I find the fact that you would see yourself like terrifying, because that kind of goes into the time travel thing.
Yeah.
Like if you time traveled and saw yourself, what would happen with all the, what would happen to
It's
physics?
like that Spider-Man meme where they're like this,
Oh.
Like, me. Yeah, that's just wild. That's wild. Melissa, could you tell us maybe, since you're from Canada, maybe some folklores that we're not familiar with here in the United States that are more familiar to Canada that, again, we don't know about, just because this is travel down here?
Well, like I said, I'm focused on the East Coast, but they've got that. What's that? Wendigo?
Yes.
Is that what it's
Wendigo.
called?
Wendigo.
Yeah, Wendigo. They've got that, and it's some hideous creature that you just don't want anything to do. And if you hear it's screaming and crying, it's also maybe something like a native version of the Hounds of the Baskervilles, some sort of horrible omens going to come to you. And we have all sorts of monsters. It's very similar. You've got like Ogopogo, monster folklores. You've probably on the East Coast, you're going to have more ghosts and black dogs. And you're going to have things like fairies, because there's a lot of Irish immigrant. People sometimes on the East Coast even sound like they have an Irish accent in Canada.
Yeah.
So you're going to have a lot of that. I was born on the East Coast, grew up mostly in the West, and a lot of it was ghostly folklores. Just little tales, the little boy, about stealing, about doing the right thing, about the devil, playing cards. That's another famous one where, everybody
Tell us
plays
about that.
cards
Yeah,
with this. Well, you always have the mysterious gentleman. He comes and he's kind of witty and charming with a beard, and he comes and he lures you into drinking and a game of cards, and you sort of gamble your soul, right? And then they all realize in one of the scenes they drop everything off the table. They go to pick up the money that they won, and they go under the table scrambling for it, and they see these hooves, and they realize they just played a card game with the devil and lost their soul.
Yeah.
There's stuff like that, and that goes back to there's a story of Glom's Castle in Scotland. It echoes back far, and it's basically warning you about the evils and the vices of that the devil will trick you with. So those are the fun ones, I think.
Yeah, I like those. Yeah, like to stay away from them, but yeah, I like those.
Yeah, don't play cards with the devil.
No, I'm not trying to.
Not recommended.
Yeah. Not this weekend. Yeah.
Not this weekend. What are you saying?
Not this
weekend.
Well, I might run a underground casino night every once in a while, but that's okay.
Underground casino. So I will say this. This is not going to be political per se. Melissa does have a great following on Twitter that is political. You have a fabulous following, Melissa. I'm so happy that you have what you have on Twitter. It's amazing. I always go to, you're one of the first Twitter accounts I go to every day and look at. But what's interesting, this is not political, everybody. We've talked about time travel before. This is interesting.
Yeah.
And we've talked about time travel with Mike Ricksecker. He's written a book. We're going to have him come back on. The book is out now with time. I still have tons of questions about time travel, but there is a folklore that's more modern that deals with Trump and time travel. Melissa, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, let's start off with Nikola Tesla's death. I think that's a good place to start off with, because this is where we start off. Now, we're not saying this is true. We're just telling you what the stories are out there, and you can come to your own conclusions, everyone. I don't pretend to know everything. But when Nikola Tesla died when he was 86 years old, he was penniless. He died in the New Yorker Hotel in New York City. And it was said that he had like 80 trunks full of
information.
The most amazing information. And the FBI wanted that information. And so as you see the image here, they sent in John G. Trump, who is Donald Trump's uncle, because he is a physicist. And they send him in to
Trump
go through.
Is named after him. His middle name is John.
Donald John. Yeah, that's right. So he goes in and he's supposedly going through these trunks and information for the FBI. And so you kind of start getting into 6 degrees of separation, because he's tied to like a whole bunch of different people, like Vannevar Bush. This is kind of links it up. It gets a little more political, but Vannevar Bush was John G. Trump's sort of protege. And Vannevar Bush was said to be in charge of Majestic 12 UFO stuff. And a lot of people say that's fake, but then there's some people who say it's sort of real. And then they're kind of tied into this other guy called T. Townsend Brown, who was also working on anti-gravity effects. And he believed in UFOs, and he mentioned time travel. So there's a whole bunch of people that there's in question where they're doing a lot of time travel research, and they're physicists and they're inventors, or they're high up, or they're in with the FBI, and they sort of all know each other. And so they're sort of going to be sharing a lot of information and deeply interested. And there's this, people say that Tesla was onto time travel, that he was doing stuff with time travel. And of course, Donald Trump was very close to his uncle and admires him very much. So there's this idea that Donald Trump has a lot of information.
I think Donald Trump has those cases, the missing cases of Tesla. I think John Trump took those things. I think there's a good chance of him having those cases. And I think that Melissa, Will, and myself need to go to the New Yorker and do a paranormal investigation in Tesla's room. I have reached out to the New Yorker. They said that they would book me to come up and do that. Obviously, we got to pay, but it's one of my bucket list places is the New Yorker.
I'll go with you.
But just to put New York back on the scene here, this is Washington Irving too, back to New York.
Yeah. And well, what's interesting is, so there's all this idea that the Trumps are time travelers, and they link it to a lot of art and books that were written in the past. Well, and so people are like, that's claptrap. But you can see, like, okay, Dalshao, he has these drawings. He was sort of a visionary artist. He would patch up all these drawings, and he would do drawings in the 1800s of these sort of airships. And he has this one drawing, and I should have given it to you so you could put it up on your screen. But he has this airship. It is called the Trump airship. It says right on it, Trump. It's written, he's done it in the 1800s. And it literally has 45 underneath the Trump. And then the guy who's running the airship looks like Donald Trump. And so people are pointing to this art like, hey, look at this. What, like, are these visionaries seeing the future, or but their point, I don't know. Does that mean Trump's a time traveler? I have no idea. But there's also books written too that are really mysterious. I know Emily knows a lot about.
I know a lot because I got the books here, and I'm going to say this real quick. Time travel. We can go till 10 after too. By the way, live. I'd sent a private chat. I don't know if y'all seen that. So we got plenty of time here. So this is John Trump. I personally, because of freedom of speech and all that stuff, rabbit hole, Julian Assange, I'm pro Julian. Like, I love what he did. It opened up Pizzagate and all that kind of stuff. Look at John Trump right here. Now, look at Julian Assange. Now, I didn't know this tonight. I kept saying that John Trump looked like Julian Assange. I learned this tonight because I just decided to Google it before the show. And like Julian Assange, John Trump, and I found on Twitter that there's a picture. I can't blow it up even more because of the pixelation of it. Here they are. Overlay.
Wow.
Pretty similar.
They look alike.
They do look similar.
Is this time travel? Is this
John? I don't think so, because John G. Trump died in 1985.
Right, but we got somebody that's releasing documents that we would not normally see as human beings. Who knows what else he knows and what else he could release? Does he have the Tesla documents eventually? Could he release it? Is this John Trump, modern day John Trump in many ways, but comes from in a different profession
or different dimension?
Yeah,
he just shows up. Well, yeah, I'm not too sure. Well, this one's interesting. So who is this, Emily? Because this is interesting. You told me about this, and I was like, oh, really?
Ingersoll Lockwood.
That's Ingersoll.
That wrote The Last President, which deals with Donald Trump, and then also wrote Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey.
And what year? When did he write them? That's the important part.
Yep. 1800s.
That's right. 1889 and 1893.
Right. So I've read bits and pieces of this. I haven't read it all. I have some stuff marked off in this. Not a lot. I have like 4 or 5 pages marked off on it. But this is Ingersoll Lockwood. Now, if you know anything about McAfee, John McAfee, when he died or whatever's happened to him, I've had Janice on the show. I need to have her back on. It's been over a year since I've talked to her. I'll reach out to her. But I believe her. She tells me that McAfee is dead. She can't get the rights to his body, which is super suspicious. But McAfee was doing a lot of hidden messages on IngersollLockwood.com. And you have to highlight the whole page and go down, and you'll find hidden messages on that. And that's where John McAfee was putting messages. So this is Ingersoll Lockwood. Now, during Trump's stuff with the election and all this kind of stuff, I don't want to get into the politics of that. There's a guy named David Clement that was a professor that wrote books that did a lot of voter stuff prior to Trump and all the figures. This is David Clement. Here they are together.
Just like the same guy.
Very similar.
Is Trump is this what are we doing here?
Well, and you got to tell them those books though. Like there's 2 books. There's the Baron Trump novels, and it's about a time traveling little boy named Baron Trump.
Yeah, the travels and adventures of little Baron Trump and his wonderful dog Burglar. Then you have Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey, and then you have 1900 or The Last President. These are all I got all 3 books in one.
You know, in The Last President, what's really creepy is that in that book from 1900, it's literally Americans are protesting a corrupt election and in the president's hometown of New York City, where it's in chaos from Marxist mobs. I kid you not.
And
that's 1900
New York.
Yeah.
All tonight's New York. Yeah. Honestly, Washington, Irving, everything's New York.
So it's weird, and like I was talking to you, Emily, and I was saying, like, is it time travel, or is the mind a time traveler? Like, can you time travel with your mind? Like, are these people who are writing these books back then, are they artists and visionaries, and they can tap into something, and they're almost time traveling themselves? I don't know. You know, they're telling the future. Like I said, maybe there is no such thing as time. Maybe it all happens at once, and they can just tap into a collective like you did with your dream about Hawaii. But
are they
turn it into art or work or books or
are they manipulating us? Do they know the history way more than we do?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I can't
because
say.
We're not taught this stuff in school.
But we're not taught a lot of stuff in school, family. Let's get real.
Well, I'm just it is. So these people are brilliant. I don't care what you think about Trump or Biden, any of them. They are brilliant in many ways that we don't understand. And a lot of times, I'm just going to tell you this. I've read a lot, especially since 2020, since the lockdowns. A lot of people don't read at all.
They don't.
I was one of those people prior to 2020. Now I read everything. And so are these people smarter than us? Then, you know, doesn't matter what background, what Republican, Democrat, any of that. Doesn't matter.
If
are they
Donald Trump or the Trump family or or John G. Trump, if they were time traveling, you know, that's a big risk, because there's this thing called the grandfather paradox, right? You know, it happens in Back to the Future, where if you change something, or you meet yourself, or you cause someone to die, you could have this whole sort of chain reaction where you don't exist anymore. So time traveling, according to the grandfather paradox, can be a really risky business. So I wouldn't be surprised if Trump would do something, or any Trump would do something risky or something like that. But I mean, I don't know, maybe that's why we have these things where we perceive, like we saw something, I don't know, like the Berenstain Bears, and it changes. Maybe someone time travels and changes something, and it causes
Mandela
this thing,
Mandela effect. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Or the butterfly effect too. That's similar.
Yeah.
Wild Bill.
One.
Well,
or how about you know what I was thinking about? How about these people? Maybe they were psychics in their own way, and they didn't want to come out as psychics, so they decided, you know what? I have all these ideas in my head. Let me just write them out as stories. You know, because back then, you know, it was kind of like shunned upon to be kind of like a psychic, right? People thought you were, kind of crazy. You know, and
there was spiritualism.
There was spiritualism, and so there was a lot of people who thought that you were crazy if you came out with these ideas and say you could, foresee the future. So maybe these people could do that. Maybe they could tap into it, and maybe decided, instead of becoming a psychic or coming out in that way, they just became authors and wrote books and decided to come out with these tales.
We have a lot of spiritualism in the White House. We got Mary Todd.
Oh, well, absolutely.
That kind of stuff. It's played a huge role in politics.
Yeah. I believe, art and writing are forms of mediumship in a way. You're sort of bringing something from the ether sort of down, and you're putting it out there to the public. But the specifics, like when you see something so crazy as a story that says the last president, and the president's from New York, and there's this Marxist sort of riots, and there's all this crazy chaos like that, and the names and the number 45, it's so specific, it's bizarre.
Cheryl Lee real quick says The Simpsons has predicted the future numerous times. I just want to put this out here. With Will had a show out this past week about The Simpsons, so go check that out on Dark Fringe Radio, facebook.com, Dark Fringe Radio, darkfringeradio.com. Cheryl Lee, because it's awesome and stuff. So real quick, because we're gonna have to close this out and let you go, Melissa. Thank you so much for coming on the show. This is super fun. You're gonna come back.
You're welcome. I'll come back, and thank you for having me, guys.
If you don't mind to tell everybody where they can find you and follow you, we would greatly appreciate it.
Okay, so my website is melissadoneclectic.com. Hopefully it's in the show notes. I'm also on Twitter as Make 70s Great. But if you go to my website, all my links are there. You can find me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Mostly I'm an Twitter. And I've got some archives on the website, melissadoneclectic.com. You can find it there, and I'll be adding new content and hopefully getting this on the roll for you guys and collecting some rare stuff from America now that I'm here in this amazing country.
We're going to have to plan something. We need to all go to Sunnyside or Sleepy Hollow, New York, and then we can go down to Nicholas.
I need to win the lottery first, Emily.
We need to go to Tesla. I'm just going to put this out there. Anybody wants to advertise on our show, please go there and fund us. Go up to Sleepy Hollow, then go to
get us a couple of hotel rooms. We'll
go to the New Yorker. Please advertise on the show. That's what we'll do, and we'll stream it all live. That would be so fun. Oh my gosh, this is so strange that everything ended up being in New York. Actually, tonight I didn't even think about it before we went live, but
it's the entryway to the free world. From the old world, isn't it? It's a gateway.
The Harbinger and the 9/11 towers has a huge deal with all of that, and the Statue of Liberty. But thank you, Melissa. We'll let you go. We'll close the show out. We appreciate you. You're coming back on. We'll talk about some other stuff the next time. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
There we go. Melissa Dawn, Eclectic. I didn't say that so much tonight. I always say electric. It's electric. Boogie.
Electric boogie.
It's eclectic. Boogie.
Yeah, that's right.
What a great show.
Yes, it was.
Headless
very much.
Horseman, Canadian Forerunner, time time travel. We appreciate everybody for tuning in. Thank you so much. You're on 107.7 FM. We love you all. Appreciate you. Please share this show out. It helps our guests. It helps our show. It helps the network. We love you all. We will be back here again next Friday at 7 p.m. 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Dr. Dean Bertram, the man.
Nice.
We're going to be talking about his new documentary coming out, The Man Who Invented the UFO. So see you all next week, same time, same place, right here on 107.7 FM. Have a wonderful night. Stay tuned to Church of Mavis. We love you.